9 biggest chilling unsolved mysteries from U.S. colleges. Everything will be fine. That's something the parents say when their kid leaving home to attend college. It can be an emotional and nerve-wracking experience for their parents, since it's easy to assume the worst when your child goes out on their own for the first time. Unfortunately, sometimes the worst actually does happen. Number 9. Paula Jean Weldon. Weldon was a sophomore at Bennington College in Bennington, Vermont at the time of her disappearance. She was last seen on December 1, 1946. She worked the breakfast and lunch shifts at the dining hall, came back to her dormitory room in Dewey Hall and spoke to her roommate for a while before saying she was going to take a study break and go for a hike. She didn't say where she was headed. Weldon left campus shortly after 2:30 p.m. Weldon was hitchhiking near the Bennington campus when a passing motorist picked her up at 2:45 p.m. She told him she was going to hike on the long trail off Route 9, near Glastonbury Mountain. The driver dropped her off on Route 9, about 3 miles from her destination. Several others saw her at that day walking on the trail. The last confirmed sighting of Weldon was at 4 p.m., when she spoke to a man on the trail and asked her how far it extended. He told her it went all the way to Canada. Weldon has never been heard from again. Her roommate became concerned the next morning when she realized she'd never returned home the previous night. Later that morning, she notified the school authorities of Weldon's disappearance. At the time, Bennington students were required to sign themselves out if they planned to stay out past 11 p.m., then check in with the school security officer upon their return. Weldon had done neither of those things. When she failed to attend her classes the following Monday, Bennington College officials notified her family and the police. An extensive search of the long trail and its environs turned up no sign of Weldon and no significant clues. The search was hampered by the fact that Vermont had no state police at the time. Eventually, officials from Massachusetts, Connecticut and New York stepped in to help. Investigators initially believed Weldon had gotten lost in the mountains and died of exposure, but as time passed without their finding any sign of her, they began to consider other theories. Although there were reports that she was somewhat depressed at the time of her disappearance, her family and friends said she only had normal problems for a girl her age and was not unhappy enough to commit suicide or run away from home. She left all her belongings behind, and her family stated she was not the type of person to leave without warning. There is no hard evidence of foul play in Weldon's disappearance, but many people believe she was murdered and buried somewhere near the Long Trail. Weldon lived with her parents and 3 younger sisters in Stamford, Connecticut when she was not in school. She enjoyed painting in oils and watercolors, pencil and charcoal sketching, and playing the guitar, and she was physically active and an experienced hiker and camper. In part because of her father's lobbying, in July 1947 Vermont passed a law creating a state police force. Weldon's disappearance remains unsolved. There has been no indication of her whereabouts since 1946. Number 8. Suzanne Joan. Yale University was shaken when 21-year-old senior Suzanne Joan was brutally murdered on the evening of December 4, 1998. Sometime after 9 p.m., Suzanne emailed a friend from her apartment, saying she was going to leave some books in the lobby for her the next morning after retrieving them from someone else. Afterwards, Suzanne left her apartment to go to the Yale Police Communications Center to return the keys for a car she had borrowed. Shortly before 10 o'clock, she was found dead approximately 3 kilometers from campus. Her throat was slit and she had been stabbed 17 times. It is unknown if Suzanne had any contact with the person borrowing her books, and that person has never been identified. After returning the keys, it is likely that Suzanne entered another vehicle at some point, since it would have been impossible for her to have walked to the murder scene during this time frame. Authorities immediately named Suzanne's thesis advisor, James Van de Velde, as the prime suspect. There were rumors he had been conducting an affair with Suzanne, but there was no evidence to support this and nothing to tie him to the crime. A witness claimed to have seen a white male sprinting away from the scene on the night of the murder, but when asked to identify Van de Velde, She claimed it wasn't him. It was recently announced that James Van de Velde is no longer a suspect, but the real killer of Suzanne Joan remains unidentified. Number 7. Kristin Denise Smart. Smart was a freshman architecture major at California Polytechnic State University, Cal Poly, in San Luis Obispo, California in 1996. She departed from an off-campus party and headed for her dormitory at approximately 1:30 and 2 a.m. on May 25, 1996. When she left the gathering, she was having trouble walking. Smart was accompanied by a female acquaintance and another student from the university, Paula Flores, when she left the party. He was a food science major at Cal Poly in 1996. Smart apparently met Flores at the party earlier in the evening. Her friends separated from Smart and Flores at the intersection of Perimeter Road and Grand Avenue on the college campus. Flores allegedly told Smart's friend that he would see Smart to her home. She was last seen walking north on Grand Avenue with Flores, towards Muir Hall, her dormitory. Smart has never been heard from again. She was not carrying any identification, cash or personal belongings at the time she vanished. Flores was reportedly seen with a black eye later in the day on May 25. When questioned about Smart's whereabouts by authorities, Flores claimed that he continued walking to his own dormitory and last saw Smart on Grand Avenue shortly after her other friend departed. Flores told several different stories to law enforcement regarding how he received his injury. Smart's roommate contacted police later in the morning of May 25, worried because Smart had not returned to her dormitory. The roommate had been at the room the night Smart was last seen, and never saw her get back home. Her clothing, toiletries, cosmetics, medicine and identification were left undisturbed in her room. There is no evidence that she made it back there. Authorities refused to take the missing persons report for 4 days, however, because Smart disappeared on Memorial Day weekend and college students often take impromptu vacations at that time. Flores is the prime and only suspect in Smart's disappearance, but authorities do not have enough evidence at their disposal to charge him in the case. The Smart family has persisted in their efforts to get investigators to come up with evidence against Flores. In 2005, Flores' mother and her boyfriend sued Smart's parents in Taman, alleging harassment, severe emotional distress and lost income as a result of their behavior. Smart's case is open and unsolved. Her family held a memorial service for her in May 2001, and again in June 2003. She was declared dead in May 2002. Smart's family attempted to pursue a civil suit against Flores for Smart's wrongful death, but dropped the case in 1996 after Flores pleaded his Fifth Amendment rights during the proceedings. Smart's family has since revived the suit, which has yet to go to trial. Smart is described as friendly and generous. She is a competitive swimmer and had traveled to many places, including Hawaii and South America, prior to her disappearance. She had originally enrolled at the University of California at Santa Barbara, but transferred to Cal Poly early in her freshman year. Her case remains unsolved. Number 6. Arliss K. Perry. Arliss K. Perry was a 19-year-old newlywed murdered inside Stanford Memorial Church in Stanford, within the grounds of Stanford University on October 12, 1974. To date, the case has not been solved. Arliss Perry grew up in Bismarck, North Dakota, where she and Bruce D. Perry were high school sweethearts. The pair married in August 1974, and Arliss moved to Stanford University with her husband, who was a sophomore pre-med student. At the time of her murder, she'd been working as a receptionist at a local law firm. The couple had been living at Quillen House in Escondido. Around 11:30 p.m. the night of October 12, 1974, the Perrys had an argument about their car's tire pressure. Arliss told her husband she wanted to pray alone inside the church, and they parted. Bruce became concerned when his wife hadn't returned home by 3 a.m. He called the Stanford police and reported her missing. Officers from the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office went to the church and reported all the outer doors were locked. Church security guard Steve Crawford and Stanford police officer found Arles's body around 5:45 a.m. October 13, in the church's east transept, near the altar. She was found face up. An ice pick was sticking out of the back of her head. There were also signs of strangulation. Police noted Perry was naked from the waist down. A 3-foot-long altar candle was in her vagina, and another between her breasts. Investigators found semen on a kneeling pillow near Perry's body. They also found a palm print on a candle. Neither the semen nor the print matched Bruce Perry or the security guard. The Santa Clara County Sheriff also ruled out any links between the murder of Perry and 3 previous murders dating back to February 1973. At least 7 people were in the church during the night of October 12 and the morning of October 13. Among them were Arles and Crawford. The other persons were identified, a 7th was not. A passerby noted this young man was about to enter the church around midnight. He had sandy-colored hair and wasn't wearing a watch, was of medium build, and stood about 5'10". Bruce Perry was an initial suspect, but was ruled out. The Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department says the case is open and active. To date, it remains unsolved. Number 5. Lynne Schultz. Schultz was last seen leaving her dormitory on the Middlebury College campus in Middlebury, Vermont on December 10, 1971, the first day of final exams before Christmas break started. Schultz returned to campus and was seen in her dormitory. She left her room at 12:55 p.m. She was on her way with her friends to take a final exam in her English drama class when she said she had forgotten her favorite pen and was going to go back to get it. The exam was scheduled for 1 p.m., she never showed up. At 2:15 p.m., Schultz was seen standing on Court Street, across the street from All the Good Things and the bus stop where she'd been earlier. This is the last time anyone ever saw or heard from her. She left her identification, checkbook and all her personal belongings behind when she vanished. She may have been carrying $30 in cash with her. Campus security was alerted to Schultz's disappearance 2 days after she was last seen, but her parents were not notified for a week. Schultz had mentioned the idea of faking her own death and starting life anew prior to her disappearance, but her friends did not take her seriously. In the letters she wrote frequently to family and friends back home, she admitted she felt homesick and had considered withdrawing from school, but she never indicated she was planning on dropping out of sight or leaving college before the term was over, and she did register for spring semester classes. Both of Schultz's parents died in the 1990s, but her sister is still alive and hopes for a resolution in her disappearance. Her case is unsolved. Some agencies give the date of Schultz's disappearance as December 11, 1971. Number 4. Joshua Kinmont. In the snow at dawn. Joshua Kinmont was a 20-year-old junior at St. John's University in Collegeville, Minnesota. Sometime between 11 p.m. and midnight on November 9, 2002, Joshua left a party at the Medencourt dormitory to go to the bathroom. Joshua's friends assumed that he simply decided to return to his apartment. But when they discovered he never went back there, he was reported missing the next day. Joshua's car, glasses and personal belongings were left behind and he was underdressed for the cold winter weather that night. It was theorized that Joshua might have been intoxicated and accidentally stumbled into a body of water and drowned after leaving the party. However, his body has never been found. Joshua's disappearance happened to take place during a 2-week period when 3 other college students from the Minnesota and Wisconsin areas, Christopher Jenkins, Michael Knoll and Eric Marie Dahlquist, mysteriously disappeared after leaving late-night parties. The bodies of the other 3 students were eventually found and while Dahlquist's murderer was caught and convicted, there is speculation that the deaths of the 2 males might be connected to Joshua's case since they each have similar appearances. However, after more than 10 years, Joshua Kinmont still remains a missing person. Number 3. Jack Davis Jr. Jack Davis Jr. was found dead in an exterior Indiana University of Pennsylvania stairwell of unrevealed circumstances on Wednesday, October 21, 1987. He had last been seen the previous Friday night, attending a party with his fraternity brothers. Authorities believed that Jack had died accidentally. They theorized that he went to the stairwell to urinate. Due to his state of intoxication, he passed out and vomited, inhaling the vomit in his lungs. The original pathologist also ruled the death an accident, determining that he died early Saturday morning. However, his family was not convinced of the official scenario. 2 years later, a friend told them to contact pathologist Dr. Cyril Wecht to help with the case. Dr. Wecht was puzzled by the fact that nobody could see his body for the days that it had been in the stairwell. He also did not understand why Jack chose to urinate in the certain place where he was found. He believes that Jack, in an inebriated state, would have not gone to such great lengths to conceal himself while urinating. According to the original report, there was no alcohol in his blood, even though he was supposedly drinking heavily on the night of his death. Wecht also found another discrepancy. Jack was clean-shaven on Friday night, but was found dead with heavy stubble on his face. The evidence seemed to suggest that he had died later than Saturday morning. Wecht also found that the cause of death, choking on regurgitated food, was impossible because food particles was not found in his lungs. Also, Wecht found that the pathologist who completed the autopsy had not opened his skull. Jack's body was exhumed for another autopsy. Wecht found 3 areas of fracture in the cranial vault of Jack's skull. He determined that the fractures were the cause of death, not choking on vomit. Wecht then visited the stairwell where Jack was found. He did not believe that Jack had fallen or been thrown to the death. He also believed that it was impossible for somebody not to have seen Jack's body lying in the stairwell because there were clear views from the window. Also, Jack's body and clothing were not wet, despite the fact that it had been raining heavily in the days prior. Dr. Wecht believed that Jack died or was injured elsewhere before being placed in the stairwell. Dr. Wecht's findings convinced authorities to reopen the case in October of 1990. However, little new evidence was uncovered and the case was closed again, and authorities still believe that Jack's death was accidental. Wecht hopes that new information will come forward and that somebody from the college will bring this information to police. In spite of Dr. Wecht's new findings, Jack's death remains unsolved. Number 2. Betsy ARDS. One of the most baffling unsolved homicides in American history took place on November 28, 1969. A 22-year-old graduate student named Betsy ARDS was doing research in the Stacks section of Patia Library at Pennsylvania State University when she was suddenly stabbed through the heart with a knife. Her body was found after an unidentified man said somebody better help that girl to the desk clerk before exiting the library. Because Betsy was wearing a red dress, blood was difficult to spot, so no one even realized she had been stabbed. When they did realize it was murder, the unidentified man was long gone before he could be pursued as a suspect. While no one else in the library saw anything, some of them claimed to have heard screams. Betsy's case was completely puzzling since she was not known to have any enemies. An assistant professor named Richard Hefner is considered one possible suspect, as he reportedly dated Betsy for a short time before her death and would face scandalous accusations of molesting young boys later on in his life. However, he died in 2002 and has never been placed in the library at the time of the murder. For over 40 years, authorities have pursued thousands of leads, and it's even rumored that Betsy ARDS' ghost haunts Patia Library. However, her killer and their motive are still unknown. Number 1. Ronald Henry Taman, Jr. Taman was last seen in Old Fisher Hall, a former Victorian mental asylum converted to a dormitory at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio on April 19, 1953. He was a resident hall advisor at Fisher Hall, and lived in room 225. At 8 p.m., he requested new bedsheets because someone had put a dead fish in his bed. Sometime around 8:30 p.m., Taman apparently heard something outside his room that disturbed him, and went out into the hallway to investigate. He never returned. His roommate came in at 10 p.m. and found him gone. The roommate originally assumed Taman was spending the night at his Delta Tau Delta fraternity house, and did not report his disappearance until the next day. There is no indication that Taman left of his own accord. His clothes, car keys, wallet, identification, watch, high school class ring and other personal items were left behind in his dormitory room, and he also left the lights on, the radio playing, and a psychology textbook lying open on his desk. His gold 1938 Chevrolet sedan was not taken from its place in the school parking lot. He left his bass fiddle in the back seat of the car, and he left behind $200 in his bank account. Taman is believed to have had no more than $10 to $15 on his person the night he disappeared, and was not wearing a coat. However, authorities have not found any indication of foul play in Taman's disappearance either. They do not believe he could have been forcibly abducted, as he was large enough and strong enough to defend himself against most attackers. They theorize that he could have developed amnesia and wandered away, but if that was the case he should have been found relatively quickly. A woman living outside of Oxford, 12 miles east of the Miami University campus, claims that a young man came to her door at 11 p.m. the evening Taman disappeared and asked what town he was in. Then he asked directions to the bus stop, which she gave him, and he left. However, the bus line had suspended its midnight run, so he could not have gotten on a bus. The witness says the man she spoke to was disheveled and dirty and appeared upset and confused. He was not wearing a coat or hat, although it was a cold night and there was snow on the ground. He was apparently on foot, since the woman did not see or hear a car. The man matched the physical description of Taman and was wearing similar clothes, but it has not been confirmed that they were the same person, and Taman's brother stated he did not believe the man the witness saw was Taman. Taman's parents, who lived in the 21,000 block of Hillgrove Avenue in Maple Heights, Ohio in 1953, last saw him a week before he disappeared and say he did not appear to be troubled by anything at the time. He was on the varsity wrestling team in college, played in the school dance band, and was a business major and a good student. He dated at the time that he vanished but did not have a steady girlfriend. In the decades after Taman's disappearance, students at Miami University claimed his ghost haunted Fisher Hall. His parents are now deceased. Fisher Hall was torn down in 1978 and an extensive search was conducted in the rubble for Taman's remains, but no evidence was located. His case still remains unsolved. If you enjoy video, please subscribe my channel. Thank for watching.